that's the holy grail as far as I'm concerned. I do look at some of these bright ones sometimes and I think, really? But at times it seems insanity to go and give them something completely different. We love these carp, don't we? And we're giving them nothing back. We're giving them too much of a chance on the clean ground. That is as good a starting point as you'll ever get for a potential area to fish, isn't it? Got to be. Every lake in the country's got a 40-pounder in. To fish for a particular carp, I don't want to have all my mates to have caught it. When it becomes gritty and hard, you have to go up a gear. It ended up about a foot deeper, dug out rock hard gravel. I went over it in the boat and put the oar down. It was crunch, crunch, crunch. I would sooner do things differently and fail than run the risk of just going with the flow.
Sorry to interrupt, but whilst I have your attention, I just want to talk about a couple of things. Firstly, would you please subscribe to our YouTube channel? We would massively appreciate it, and you will stay very much up to date with everything YouTube orientated that we do. Secondly, and as well as asking you for a little favour, we have a little something that might be of interest to you. If you click the link in description or scan the QR code on screen, you will be entitled to 50% off your first 3 months as a Cypography member. And as a Cypography member, you will get access to over 1,000 videos and several other member perks. Joining us for this month's Rotary is Luke Stevenson, a hardened angler with a unique way of doing things. His focused approach to targeting individual fish has brought him consistent success wherever he goes, and we couldn't wait to dig deep into how he thinks about and tackles big carp fishing.
Right, Luke, first things first, mate, you have the book, so if you'd like to open that and have a little look at what George has asked you.
In a world full of so many big carp, with everything being a lot more diluted in terms of lots of big carp out there, how do you select a fish or a group of fish to target? What do you take into account? History of the fish, level of difficulty, etc, etc.
Right, it's an interesting one really. Going back some years, perhaps 20 years ago or even longer, the bigger carp you had access to, generally that was what you were going to perhaps target. It was all driven by size. Things have changed so much in such a short space of time, it seems, whereby there's big carp everywhere. Like every lake in the country's got a 40-pounder in. Like, you know, it's like 50-pounders are common. You know, so for me, there's so much more to it now than size. There'll be obviously there's looks, there's character of a fish. You know, I'm looking for something a bit different in a carp, where they live, the history of the carp. Something that's becoming more I think about now than anything is I don't want to be fishing and devoting vast amounts of time, effort, and everything else into catching a carp that I almost feel familiar to before I've even caught it. But in terms of, you know, I don't want a carp I've seen in loads of magazines or in more recent times, like Instagram and social media. You see countless shots of a fish or lots of different people with a particular fish. That just dilutes that something that drives me to want to go and catch it. So, for instance, you know, I'm fishing here. It's a local pit to home. There's one big one in here, sort of maybe 45-pound, big carp that. But trying to find a picture of it is really hard. None of my mates have caught it, and for me, there's that element of there's still a bit of like mystery there, you know, and that in itself, I think, is probably the biggest driving factor, influence now for me to fish for a particular carp. I don't want to have all my mates to have caught it. I don't want to feel really familiar to that carp. And you know, I don't want to know the ins and outs of the cat's dinner, like, you know, before I've gone there. I want it to be exciting, and when I get a carp on the bank that, you know, that I'm really desperate to catch, I don't want it to be too familiar. I want to take it all in, and I want that to be a brand new magical experience for me.
Do you see the kind of conflict there between what we probably all grew up with, Luke, which was the idea that history, and therefore other people having caught it and documented it, kind of elevated certain carp, and now you almost want carp with no history, but still a little bit of history, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. I get that. But, you know, this game, it's evolving, isn't it? And you know, there's so many. I think what it boils down to is, before there wasn't many big fish, so of course there was going to be, you know, you're going to be looking at other your peers and what have you that people have gone before you have caught. Now there's loads out there for you to go and catch and target. So why should you go and fish for something that everyone else has caught? Why don't you want to go and do something a little bit different, walk your own path and target your own group of fish that really mean something to you, not necessarily just because everyone else has gone and caught them.
And how hard is that actually in practice to do now because of how busy carp fishing is?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's the holy grail that we all want, isn't it? A quiet lake with some really big, beautiful carp in, like, you know, that trying to find that is just, they're out there, you know, they're out there. And lakes, we were talking earlier, weren't we, about how lakes go through lulls where perhaps like one big one or a group of big ones die. They'll go through a quiet stage. They're the times to often go and have a look, because often there'll be a few nice ones left and forgotten about a little bit. But yeah.
Given as you have time and you're very serious about your big carp fishing, how serious are you about researching future targets? What would they look like? What would they have to be? And how far would you travel for those now?
You know, now everything's pretty much Instagram and social media, isn't it? And you'll be flicking through that. Occasionally you'll get one stop you in your tracks, or you've got mates that talk about particular lakes. I'm probably not the most organised in terms of grabbing tickets in advance, but I'll always have my. I'm looking for groups, not necessarily one particular fish, but groups, a collective group of exceptionally nice carp, and then I'm going to be. I'll try and go and fish there when the time's right and when you're not busy wrapped up somewhere else.
And because of the way the carp scene is around the country now, and the way that perhaps big carp now look, does it mean that you're less eager to rush through what might be a group of exceptional fish, or are you quite keen to get the job done still?
No, I mean, yeah, we all. The name of the game is you get there and you try and get them as quick as possible. But I look back with great fondness on some of the places I've been to. More so, the more experienced you become and the more you do it. And let's face it, you spend vast amounts of time. Time is the most precious commodity there is. And you spend vast amounts of it at some of these places. You should really enjoy being in those places. Often the lake is as important as the carp. It's not just the carp. It's got to be a bit of everything. It's got to be the lake. The lake's got to have a particular spirit about it. You know, wildlife, all of those wholesome, lovely things that you might well take for granted, but it all builds it to a bigger picture and becomes, when looking back on, a rounded, just a really lovely memory.
I suppose the irony is, mate, there are more big carp than ever, and yet potentially you're finding it more difficult to find what you want to fish for.
Yeah, I suppose the longer you're carp fishing and the more experiences you've had and the more big carp you've caught, you become a bit more selective and a bit more picky about the journeys, the carp you want to fish for, the environments in which they live in. The pool becomes a bit smaller, doesn't it?
Okay, mate, we're going to leave that one there, and we're going to move on to one of the questions that both George and Elliot addressed. And Elliot wanted this in particular to be passed on to you. George mentioned that he tries to do things differently to everyone else. I think that's a common trait for a lot of big carp anglers. How important of a factor is that for you? And let's talk a little bit about gravel, because it's something that I know you're quite polarized about.
Yeah, the trying to do things differently. It's massive in terms of my my whole attitude towards going into a new adventure somewhere. Is I want to be doing things differently. For starters, common sense will tell you that you do the same. That whole bit of a cliche. You do the same as everyone else, catch the same as everyone else. And I'm not prepared to. I would sooner do things differently and fail than run the risk of just going with the flow. It's just not my attitude probably in every walk of life, if I'm honest. But I get a real buzz out of trying to work it out. That is really the buzz for me in big carp fishing. Is it's like you're building the pieces. You're the pieces of a puzzle, and you've got to put them all together. And you're forever watching and trying to process it all the information you get, process that information and come out with a plan. And generally I want to try and do something that's, carp sort of learn by association, don't they? And things come round in fashions, if you like. Certain ways or baits or methods will catch a lot of carp until they don't. And then it will take someone else doing something quite stark, often differently, for them to sort of excel. Old matey over there, he's had 30 fish this year, but generally speaking, he'll be doing something different to the rest of them. Make no mistake.
Do you worry that in sort of regularly publicising and being asked to show what you do, that you're in effect forcing people to look at tactics that perhaps you feel might have been neglected, like your chod fishing, for instance? Do you ever worry that it might come back around off the back of something you've said or done?
No, not really with things like that, because fishing for them in there where they're happy to eat on the softer ground, but just being presented well, that will never tire, will it? They've got to eat, So no, I get what you're saying. That you don't give away all your little secrets, but then you've still got to go out there and do those things well. And lakes are a living, breathing thing. They're forever evolving. So by the time something's been said and done and talked about, there'll be something else you can do. And anyway, that's all part of the fun, isn't it? Finding out what that next thing is and then doing it.
I suppose that leads us nicely on to the gravel aspect of this question. Both Elliot and George actively target gravel, and you don't.
No, I listened to George's. You sent me George's, and I listened to his opinions on it. Now, he says he will always look for something different. I will always look for something different. So if it's a load of hard ground out there, I'm going to be actively looking for a bit of a softer depression in that ground. But generally speaking, I will do everything to not fish on gravel. And my reasons for that are like when you see fish feeding naturally, fizzing up and not on bait, it'll always be on the softer ground. All their food is in the softer ground, either in weed or in what we call silt, mud, whatever you want to call it, dirty, sandy bottom, whatever. But also I find them much easier. There's lots of variables, but basically I find them a lot easier to hook. They've got to be easier to hook when they're really working for our bait we've given them on a bit of dirty ground. They're blowing crap out. They're through the gills, through the mouth, whatever. That alien object of a hook that we're trying to set you know, they can't differentiate that, but you know, it's much harder for them to differentiate all of our tackle that's out there basically when there's shit flying around. But then you've got a clean bit of gravel, and they can, you know, it must be easier for them to see, probably more feel, I would say. And I find that really quite obvious now with the underwater filming. I think it's also, you know, what we get done all the time. I don't think that we get done as much as that out in the pond in a real fishing situation. Certainly the situations I try and fish in, simply because you're giving them too much of a chance on the clean ground. There's loads of variables with this, and you could go on and on and on about it. But it definitely, as long as you're presented out on the dirtier ground, why on earth would you not want to fish there? But I mean, you know, there's no rights and wrongs. It's what you prefer to do. But it seems crazy to. I mean, often with baiting, your spots will turn out to be gravel in the end. I remember going back to St Ives shallow pit. I was fishing a particular swim for quite a good amount of time, and reaping lots of carp from it, more than you would have thought, and it went on for longer. In the end, it was low. It was sort of low lying Canadian that I was fishing on with like little chod rigs to begin with. In the end, it ended up about a foot deeper, dug out rock hard gravel. I went over it in a boat and put the oar down. It was oar step, 4 step, then my old arm would disappear down and crunch right on the spot, you know, and that was just through them excavating it out. But I would never choose to fish that from the word go, you know. It'll always be a bit of dirtier ground. You know, my ideal, what I'd be looking for would be a bit of silty ground with a few shoots of weed coming up sparsely through it. Be perfect for a pop-up rig.
Does that mean then that it's all over for you when it does get to like the stage that you discussed on the shallow, or would you follow that through and just change the bottom baits and carry on with it?
Correct. Yeah, I would, and I did. That was how it happened there. I had to go to a bottom bait, but generally you get a feel for when an area's sort of over, and not, and then you might need to move just along, but off that spot. But they wise up to it. I'm sure they wise up to it, especially if it's a low stock lake and you've had a good amount of fish from that area. I'm sure most of their mates will have said carp get hooked from there, and so there's a finite amount of carp you'll pick from an area in a time frame, without doubt.